70,000 years ago, you were nobody special. Not the strongest animal out there, not the fastest, definitely not at the top of the food chain. A lion could take you down in 3 seconds flat. A leopard could smell you before you even knew it was there. And yet, somehow, that same weak, unimpressive creature went on to build cities like New York, walked on the moon, split the atom, wrote laws, built companies, sent rockets to Mars. So here's the real question tonight. What actually happened? How did an animal that could barely survive turn into the single most powerful species this planet has ever seen? The answer isn't muscle, it isn't claws or teeth, and honestly, it isn't even intelligence, not directly anyway. The real answer is something a lot stranger, and by the end of this video, you're going to look at your own species in a completely different light. Hey everyone, I'm Sushil, and you're watching English Audiobook Summary. Last week, my friend Jordan, a total history nerd here in the States, hit me with a question out of nowhere. Are humans actually the biggest winners of evolution, or did we just get lucky? That one question sent me right back to this book, Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, by historian Yuval Noah Harari. One of the most talked about books of the last decade, translated into more than 65 languages, read by everyone from Silicon Valley CEOs to college freshmen across America. Today, we're breaking down the entire book, every revolution that built the modern world, how a handful of made-up stories turned total strangers into nations, why farming, the thing we were always taught was humanity's greatest achievement, might actually have been our biggest mistake. And by the end of this story, you're going to have to ask yourself a pretty uncomfortable question. Are we actually happier now than we were 70,000 years ago? Stick around, because the final chapter of this story hasn't even been written yet, and it might be the most dangerous one of all. All right, let's go back to the very beginning. Picture this. A forest, roughly 70,000 years ago, maybe somewhere in what's now the Sierra Nevada in California, maybe deep in a corner of Africa. There's a human sitting there. It looks just like us, with a brain just as big as ours. But his life isn't all that different from any other animal's. No cities, no language complex enough to tell real stories, no religion, no nations. And then, suddenly, in evolutionary terms, this really was sudden. Something changed. Harari calls this the cognitive revolution. It was the moment something got rewired in the human brain that had never shown up in any other species before. Now, you might be thinking, plenty of animals talk. Ants communicate. Dolphins communicate. True. But here's the difference. No animal on Earth can turn to another and say, across the river, behind that mountain, there's a guardian spirit watching over our tribe, and if we honor it, it'll protect us. That sentence is a lie. There's no guardian spirit. But the ability to tell that lie, the ability to invent fiction, is exactly what set humans apart. Every other creature on the planet. Think about modern America for a second. The United States isn't a physical thing you can touch. Google Inc. isn't a person. The Constitution, the dollar, human rights, these are all just stories that millions of total strangers happen to believe in, together. And that shared belief. What lets them cooperate on a massive scale? Here's a wild fact Harari points out. A group of chimpanzees can only stay organized up to about 50 members. Past that, it falls apart into chaos, because every single chimp needs to personally know every other chimp. Humans? We blew right past that limit. Why? Because we don't need to know each other personally at all. A stranger in New York and a stranger in Texas have never met. But they both trust the American dollar. They both follow U.S. law. That shared belief is the glue that bound together not dozens, not hundreds, but millions of strangers. And now we get to the most heartbreaking part of this chapter. We weren't the only human species walking this planet. Neanderthals lived alongside us, physically stronger, bigger brains, way better built for the cold. In a one-on-one fight, a Neanderthal probably wins every time. But Neanderthals stayed stuck in small, scattered groups, tribes of maybe 20 or 30, barely interacting with each other. Homo sapiens, on the other hand? We built stories, we built networks, we organized in the hundreds and made plans together. The result? Today, Neanderthals only exist behind glass in museum displays, and we, running purely on our tiny, made-up stories, ended up ruling the entire planet. So the next time you see millions of people rallying behind one flag or losing their minds over one brand, remember, that's not magic. That's the exact same 70,000-year-old trick still wired into our brains. But here's the question that comes next. If these stories made us this powerful, why didn't they? Will we ever leave the forest and settle down in one place? And was that decision actually good for us? Up next, one of the most controversial decisions in human history. Harari has a name for it: humanity's biggest fraud. Let's pick up right where we left off. Humans now had language, stories, and the ability to organize in massive groups. And yet, for thousands of years, we kept living the same way. Wandering, hunting, eating whatever we could find. No permanent home, no farms, no concept of property at all. Then, around 10,000 years ago, something strange happened. A human looked at a wild wheat plant and thought, "Why don't I just grow this myself?" Sounds like a small decision, right? But Harari says this was the biggest gamble in human history, and we're still paying for it today. Stick with me here for a second. We've all been taught in school that farming was humanity's greatest achievement. You've seen the pictures: some scrawny, starving caveman on one side, a happy farmer standing proudly outside his home on the other. Progress, right? Harari flips that entire story on its head. He says we didn't actually domesticate wheat. Wheat domesticated us. Think about what a hunter-gatherer's life actually looked like. He worked maybe a few hours a day. The forest gave him a wildly diverse diet: fruits, nuts, meat. No boss, no fixed schedule, no obligation to stay in one place. If resources ran low in one spot, he just packed up and moved. Now look at a farmer's life. Wake up, head straight to the field. Water the crops, pull the weeds, stress about the harvest. Your entire survival now depends on one single crop: wheat, barley, rice. No rain? Bugs get to it. Your whole family could starve. So Harari asks the obvious question: why did we make that trade? Why did we give up our freedom, our varied diet, our flexible way of life, for a wheat plant? The answer is simple: greed for surplus. Once you realize a little more effort means a little more food, you keep putting in that effort, generation after generation. And one day you wake up and realize there's no going back. You're trapped. And that's exactly where the real cost begins. Once humans settled down, the concept of land ownership showed up for the very first time: property. And wherever property exists, inequality follows close behind. Some people ended up with huge plots of land, others with nothing at all. That's the exact moment the gap between rich and poor was born, a gap you can still see today, from small-town America to the biggest cities in the world. Cost number 2: disease. In small hunter-gatherer bands, illness had nowhere to spread. But once humans crammed into permanent settlements, living close to domesticated animals, and to each other, bacteria and viruses finally had the perfect breeding ground. Pretty much every pandemic in human history traces its roots back, in one way or another, to that agricultural shift. Cost number 3. Diet quality tanked. Early humans ate dozens of different fruits, nuts, and meats. After farming took over, most people became dependent on just 1 or 2 crops. Nutrition dropped. Bones got weaker. Archaeological studies actually show early farmers were shorter and physically weaker than their hunter-gatherer ancestors. So here's the real question. If farming wrecked our health, stole our freedom, and created inequality, why do we still call it progress? Harari's answer is honestly kind of shocking. He says this progress was never for the individual. It only made sense at the level of the species. More surplus food meant more babies could survive. More babies meant a bigger population. The human head count kept climbing, even as each individual person's daily life got harder. It's basically like a company slashing employee salaries and morale just to keep pumping up its growth numbers. The company gets bigger. The people inside it get more miserable. But there's a twist to this story too. Because of that food surplus, not everyone needed to work the fields anymore. Some people got freed up. Someone became a potter. Someone else built tools. And someone else invented new techniques. That's where specialization began. And that's the exact chain of events that eventually led to cities, civilizations, and, eventually, the entire modern world we live in today. So it was a double-edged sword. On one side, humans became slaves to their own land. On the other, that very trap laid the foundation for everything civilization would become. Harari doesn't call it the biggest fraud for nothing. He says it's one of history's biggest lessons. Progress isn't always the same thing as individual happiness. Sometimes we walk down a path with no way back, without even realizing we've been trapped. Now think about this. If these scattered little farming communities were already struggling this much, how did they ever turn into massive civilizations? Into empires? Into one connected world? The answer comes down to 3 things: money, empires, and religion. Let's get into it. So, now we've got thousands of scattered little farming communities, each speaking a different language, worshipping different gods, and boxed into their own tiny corner of the world. One community has no idea the other even exists. So, how did this scattered world turn into the connected, globalized one we live in today? How can someone sitting in Los Angeles trades with a person they've never met, halfway across the planet? Harari says 3 forces made this happen: money, empire, and religion. And here's the thing all 3 have in common. Just like language, they're all shared fictions. Just powerful enough fictions to stitch the entire world together. Let's start with money. Say a farmer has wheat, and he needs shoes. A shoemaker has shoes, but he doesn't want wheat. He wants a blanket. How does that deal even happen? This is the classic problem with a barter system. What you have almost never lines up with what the other guy actually wants. Money solved that problem completely. A piece of paper, a coin, or today, just a number on your phone screen. None of it has any real value on its own. You can't eat it. You can't wear it. But the entire world, whether it's a rancher in Texas or a trader in Tokyo, buys into the exact same story, that this piece of paper is worth something. Harari puts it beautifully. Money is the most universal, most tolerant thing humans have ever invented. A religion asks what you believe. An empire asks where your loyalty lies. Money asks nothing. A Christian, a Muslim, an atheist, their dollar spends exactly the same. That's why money crossed every border, every language, every culture on Earth. Now let's talk about empires. Today, the word empire mostly makes us think of oppression and colonization. And that's not wrong. There's absolutely a dark side there. But Harari points out an uncomfortable truth. Empires were the first thing in history to pull wildly different cultures under one law, one system of government. Look at the Roman Empire. It took all of Europe's scattered tribes and put them under one common law, one currency, and one connected road network. That's exactly why a trader could travel from Spain to Turkey without hitting a single major roadblock. Empires weren't just about grabbing land. Their real impact was slowly merging different tribes, different languages, and different beliefs into one massive system. Whether it happened through force, or whether it was fair or not, that merging laid the actual groundwork for today's globalized world. And the third force, religion. Harari's take here is a little provocative. He says whether or not a religion is scientifically true doesn't really matter. Its real power was giving millions of strangers one shared moral code, one shared story about what's right, what's wrong, and what life is actually for. Think about two people, one in Rome, one in Egypt, who've never met, speak different languages, and eat completely different food. But if they both believe in the same God, suddenly there's an invisible bond between them. They stop seeing each other as strangers and start seeing each other as one of us. Money, empire, and religion. Together, these three built the foundation of what we now call globalization. Money gave the world a shared economic language. Empires gave it political structure and stability, and religion gave it the emotional glue strong enough to bond total strangers together. That's when trade really took off. Along routes like the Silk Road, Chinese silk, spices from India, and European technology, all of it started flowing to each other. Things that used to be trapped in one region started spreading across the entire world. But there was still one piece missing. Money existed, empires existed, religion existed. But the way we understood the world itself hadn't changed. We still explained everything through myth and divine will. Someone got sick, God's punishment. The sun rose and set, divine order. Then, one day, in Europe, a handful of people started asking a genuinely dangerous question. Do we actually know everything we think we know? And that one question shook the entire world. For the first time, humans started doubting the oldest, most trusted stories they'd ever believed in. Next up, the scientific revolution, where humans traded God for the microscope and the telescope as their new teachers. At this point, humans had money, empires, and religion. The world was connected. But one thing hadn't changed at all: the way we understood reality itself. For thousands of years, if you asked why the sun shines, why people get sick, why it rains, the answer was always the same. God's. It's God's will. It's written in the scriptures. That's just what the elders always said. Then, in 16th century Europe, a handful of people started saying something dangerous. We don't know. Sounds like such a small thing to say. But Harari argues those three words were the biggest turning point in human history. For thousands of years, humanity's entire confidence rested on the belief that we already had every answer, buried somewhere in an old book, an old story. And suddenly, people started saying, maybe we don't actually know anything. Let's go find out. That mindset became known as the scientific revolution. The first real bombshell came from Copernicus. For thousands of years, everyone believed Earth sat at the center of the universe, with the sun, moon, and stars all revolving around us. This wasn't just a science question, it was tied straight to human identity. We saw ourselves as special because we assumed all of creation revolved around us. Then Copernicus said, nope. Earth revolves around the sun, not the other way around. And suddenly, humanity had to face a hard truth. Maybe we're not the center of the universe at all. Maybe we're just a small corner in something unimaginably bigger. Galileo backed it up with his telescope. Then came Isaac Newton, who explained why an apple falls from a tree and why planets stay locked in their orbits. For the first time, the universe wasn't some divine mystery only God could understand. It became something we could actually figure out ourselves through logic and math. And centuries later, Charles Darwin dropped the biggest bomb of all. He said humans weren't some divine creation. We're the product of a long, slow evolutionary process, just like every other animal and every other plant on this planet. Think about the weight of that. This wasn't just a scientific theory. It was a direct hit on humanity's entire self-image. We saw ourselves as God's most special creation, and suddenly science was saying, "No, you're just another twist in evolution, same as everything else." Here's where Harari makes a really interesting point. Science, technology, and capitalism all got locked together, feeding off each other like a self-running cycle. Science produced new discoveries. Those discoveries built new technology. New technology built new products, new tools, and new factories. And selling all those products needed a whole new economic system, capitalism. And capitalism, to keep growing, needed more science, more technology. An endless loop. That's exactly why, when European ships set sail to explore new continents, it wasn't just pure curiosity. Sure, some explorers genuinely wanted to know what was out there. But the real funding, the real backing, came from businessmen and governments who knew exactly what new land meant. New resources, new trade routes, bigger profits. Science started out driven by curiosity. Capitalism is what fueled it into overdrive. Here's a point Harari makes that sounds provocative at first, but actually holds up the more you think about it. He says science itself has become a new religion in the modern world. Think about it. People used to go to a priest with every question. Now we go to Google, to scientists, to researchers. Religion used to promise salvation. Science promises progress. Better medicine, longer life, more comfort. People used to put their faith in scripture. Now we put our faith in peer-reviewed research papers, even though most of us have never actually read one, let alone understood it. It's the exact same kind of faith. God just got replaced by people in lab coats, and that new faith paid off. Medicine defeated diseases that used to be considered a curse. Life expectancy doubled. Things that used to be blamed on God's will became problems we could actually research and solve. But this whole revolution came with a price tag. Once humans learned to understand and control the laws of nature, we also learned how to exploit it. Industrial machines, factories, mass production, all of it was a direct result of that scientific mindset. And that same mindset became the foundation for capitalism and consumerism. Because the question wasn't, how does the world work anymore? Now the question was, how do we turn this knowledge into money? And how do we keep growth going forever? So, now we've got science, we've got technology, and we've built the habit of asking, how does this work? But humanity very quickly turned that question into a different one. How do I make money off this? And that's where a story begins that's still controlling every single one of our lives today. Capitalism, Harari says. Capitalism isn't just some concept locked away in economics textbooks. It's a mindset, a way of seeing the entire world, and its whole foundation rests on one simple, but incredibly dangerous, idea. Growth should never stop. Think about it this way. For thousands of years, human thinking was straightforward. Make do with whatever resources you have. Good harvest this year? Great. Bad harvest? Eat less. But capitalism rewrote that entire rulebook. The question stopped being, how much do we have? It became, how do we get more than this next year? And that's where a brand new concept was born. Investment. Say a baker only has enough money to bake 100 loaves of bread a day. Under the old way of thinking, he'd just keep baking and selling those same 100 loaves forever. But capitalism says, take today's profit, put it right back into the business. Buy a bigger oven, bake 200 loaves next year, open a second shop, then a factory. Then a company is selling nationwide. Sounds pretty logical, right? Growth, progress, getting bigger. But Harari raises a critical question here. If everyone, every single year, wants more and more, where does it actually end? The answer is, it never does. And that's exactly where capitalism brings along its twin brother, consumerism. Because if companies always want to produce more, somebody has to buy all of it. So an entire system got built around one single job, making us feel like whatever we already have just isn't enough. Think about your phone for a second. It's working perfectly fine right now. Calls go through, photos come out great, and apps run smoothly. And yet, every single year, when a new iPhone or Galaxy drops, something inside you goes, I need that. Why? Because billions of ads on every screen, on every billboard, are hammering the same message. What you have isn't enough. Happiness is one purchase away. Harari has a great name for this, the hedonic treadmill. You're running and running, but you never actually get anywhere. Here's how it works. You wanted a new car, you got it. You're happy for a few weeks. Then that feeling just becomes your new normal. Then your eyes land on an even bigger car. The cycle never stops. New craving, brief happiness, that happiness fading, and then another new craving right behind it. And this isn't just about stuff. It bleeds into your career too. You get a big promotion, you're thrilled for a few weeks, then you're already hungry for the next title. You get a bigger house, you're happy for a few months, then you're already dreaming about an even bigger one. Here's Harari's most provocative point in this whole section. Capitalism has made us the wealthiest generation, materially speaking, in all of human history. We have more comfort, more gadgets, and more options than any era before us. And yet, study after study shows that past a certain point, more money and more stuff simply stop making us happier. So why are we still stuck in this cycle? Because the entire system depends on it. Think about it. If every single person on Earth suddenly decided, I don't need anything more, what I have is enough, the global economy would collapse overnight. Companies would shut down. People would lose their jobs. Markets would crash. The entire modern system runs on one single thing. Us, always wanting more. And there's a massive cost to that, on the planet itself. The more we produce, the more we consume, the more we rip out of the earth, trees, minerals, oil, and water. Harari warns that this model of endless growth simply isn't sustainable on a planet with finite resources. Eventually, it breaks. So the question becomes, if capitalism and consumerism can't actually give us real happiness, where does real happiness even come from? Harari's answer is simple, but honestly, kind of surprising. Maybe true satisfaction isn't found out there, in things at all. Maybe it's found in awareness, inside us. We'll get to that fully, later in this video. For now, this leaves us with one more question. That same hunger for endless growth ended up sparking another massive revolution, one that permanently changed how humans work, how our cities look, and how the entire world runs. The age of machines, the age of factories. Capitalism needed endless growth, and growth needed more production, in less time, at a lower cost. Human hands just couldn't keep up with that kind of speed. So, along came the answer that redrew the entire map of the world: machines. This story kicks off in 18th century Britain. The steam engine, textile mills, coal mining, all of it combined into what we now call the Industrial Revolution. First, picture what the world looked like before all this. A carpenter hand-built a chair, maybe one or two a day. A weaver hand-wove cloth, a few yards a week. Slow, sure, but personal. You could see the human hand, the human effort, in absolutely everything. Then machines showed up, and suddenly, the same job that took a person a full week could be done in hours. A single factory could churn out hundreds of chairs, thousands of yards of fabric, non-stop, without ever getting tired. Sounds like progress. And in some ways, it was. But here's where Harari makes a much deeper point. This revolution didn't just change how things were produced. It changed what it meant to be human. Think about that shift. People used to live in villages, farm the land, and work on their own time. Start at sunrise, stop at sunset. But as factories popped up everywhere, people flooded into cities, chasing jobs. That was the first great migration that permanently pulled rural life into urban life, and city life was a completely different world. No more sunrise. Now a factory bell woke you up. Your work wasn't your own anymore. You became one tiny piece of a much bigger machine. The same task, over and over, all day long, the exact same repetitive motion. Harari calls this becoming a cog in the machine. And with that came a strange emotional gap. A craftsman used to look at a chair he built and feel real pride. I made this. But a factory worker might just hammer the same nail into the same spot, all day, every day, with no idea what his piece of work would even become. This is called alienation, feeling completely disconnected from your own labor. But this entire transformation carried an even heavier price on the planet itself. Human civilization used to run on renewable resources, sunlight, wind, and animal power. But the Industrial Revolution introduced a brand new addiction: fossil fuels. Coal first, then oil. Pulled from the ground, burned up, feeding an appetite that never quits. Harari lays out this pattern perfectly. Humans have always reshaped their environment throughout history. But after the Industrial Revolution, that reshaping turned aggressive. Factories, roads, bridges, cities. We transformed the world around us faster than at any other point in human history. But here's the twist. Harari says this wasn't just about reshaping the outside world. We reshaped ourselves too. Think about it. Before industrial life, human time moved with nature. The seasons, the harvest, day and night. After the Industrial Revolution, our time started running on clocks and schedules instead. 9-to-5 jobs, fixed lunch breaks, alarm clocks. We drifted further and further from our natural instincts and closer to a mechanical routine. And honestly, that pattern is still running today. Factories might have been replaced by offices and laptops, but the same structure is still steering our lives. Fixed hours, targets, deadlines, and productivity metrics. Harari drops a serious warning here too. This industrial model delivers short-term economic growth, but it's become a massive long-term risk for the planet. Pollution, deforestation, climate change, all of it traces back to one decision made centuries ago: trusting machines more than we ever trusted our own two hands. So now, we're living in a world that's mechanized, connected, and industrialized. But one question still hangs in the air. Where does this all end? Are humans about to go past machines entirely and become something machine-like themselves? Because today's technology, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and biotechnology, is exactly the next step in that same industrial mindset. And this next step could be big enough to redefine what it even means to be human. The future of humanity. Are we building our own successors? Throughout this entire story, we've watched humans reshape themselves and their environment, over and over, from the cognitive revolution all the way to the industrial revolution. But now, we're standing at a turning point unlike anything before it. For the very first time, humans aren't just changing the world around them. We're learning to control ourselves, our bodies, our minds, even our own evolution. Harari raises a massive question here. For millions of years, evolution was a slow, natural process. Whatever species could adapt to its environment survived, a process that unfolded over thousands, millions of years, with nobody steering the wheel. But for the first time ever, nobody else is in the driver's seat of evolution. We are. Think about genetic engineering. Scientists today can already edit human DNA using gene editing tools. Tomorrow, that might mean curing a disease. But the day after tomorrow, we might be choosing our children's height, boosting their intelligence, and engineering their physical strength. Sounds like science fiction. But Harari's point is, this isn't fiction anymore. The technology already exists. The only real question is when we'll allow ourselves to use it, and how far we'll take it. And that's undoubtedly where a genuinely frightening question comes in. If genetic enhancement comes with a massive price tag, which, let's be honest, every cutting-edge technology does at first, who gets access to it first? The answer's obvious: whoever already has the money. Think about what that actually means. On one side, kids whose parents can afford genetic enhancement, smarter, healthier, maybe living longer. On the other side, everybody else, with no access at all. Harari calls this a brand new kind of inequality, not about money or power this time, but about biology itself. A genetically enhanced elite class, and everyone else, just regular, unmodified Homo sapiens. Now let's talk about the other major force: artificial intelligence. AI's already in your phone, driving your car, recommending your next song. But Harari says this is just the opening act. The real question isn't whether AI will eventually become as smart as humans. The real question is when the line between human and machine starts to blur completely. Picture a future where the human brain connects directly to computers, where you can upload or download your own memories, where mechanical parts inside your body push you past your natural physical limits. Harari calls this the age of the cyborg, half biological, half mechanical. And that opens up a seriously deep philosophical question. If we merge our brains with machines, if our bodies become part mechanical, are we still human? Or have we quietly become something else entirely? Harari doesn't give us a clean answer here, but he does drop a serious warning. Whenever this much power ends up in anyone's hands, the real question becomes, who controls it? Should this kind of technology sit in the hands of governments? Should private companies get to decide who gets enhanced and who doesn't? If that answer falls into the wrong hands, this stops being just another piece of technology. It becomes one of the biggest risks in human history. Harari draws a comparison here that hits pretty hard. Just like Homo sapiens once outcompeted the Neanderthals and drove them into extinction, is it possible that we're now building our own upgraded species, one that could eventually make today's version of Homo sapiens obsolete? Sit with that for a second. We might literally be engineering our own successors. And if that actually happens, what happens to the regular human in that new world? Harari's final message here is pretty clear. This future isn't inherently good or bad. It's simply possible. And which direction it goes depends entirely on human choices. Science is handing us incredible power, but how we use that power isn't a science question at all. It's a question of ethics, of wisdom. And that leads us straight into the final, and maybe the most personal, part of this entire book. After all this power, all this progress, all this technology, one last question remains, and it might matter more than any of the others. Are we actually happy? So here we are. Humans invented language, told stories, farmed the land, built empires, used science to understand the universe, used machines to reshape the world, and now we're standing right at the edge of controlling our own evolution. So after all of that, Harari asks one question that sounds simple on the surface, but might be the hardest one to actually answer. After everything we've achieved, are we genuinely as happy as we should be? Take a second to think about this. Currently, you have things a king 500 years ago couldn't have even imagined. Light at the flip of a switch, hot water on demand, a conversation with someone thousands of miles away, instantly. Diseases that used to wipe out entire villages now get cured with a single shot. Food, once a daily struggle, now shows up at your door in 20 minutes. So be honest, do you actually feel happier than that hunter-gatherer, sitting by a fire with his tribe 70,000 years ago? Harari's answer catches you off guard. He says, probably not. Maybe not even close. That sounds strange, so let's break it down. That hunter-gatherer didn't have a smartphone, didn't have modern medicine, but he had something a lot of us are actually missing today. Deep community connection. A clear, simple purpose every single day. Survive. Take care of your tribe. No endless comparison. No social media constantly reminds him that someone else out there is living a better life. And this is where Harari makes his most powerful argument. Happiness isn't really tied to material progress. It's tied to the gap between your expectations and your reality. Think about it this way. Someone who has very little but expects very little can feel completely satisfied. Someone who has a lot and expects even more will stay dissatisfied no matter how much they actually own. And in the modern world, our expectations just keep climbing. Social media shows us, every single day, someone with a better house, a better body, a better vacation. Ads constantly remind us that whatever we have isn't enough. The result? No matter how good our real life actually gets, our expectations always seem to sprint one step ahead of it. Harari makes another deep point here. In the old world, whether it was religion or shared community myths, people got handed a clear sense of purpose. The answer to "why am I here" already existed. But in today's world, where science has torn down a lot of those old myths, each one of us has to go find our own purpose. For some, it's a career. For some, it's family. For some, it's personal achievement. But there's no universal, ready-made answer anymore. And weirdly enough, that freedom becomes a burden of its own. When every path is open to you, picking the right one gets a lot harder. So the real question is, where does actual happiness come from? Harari's answer moves away from material things and turns inward. He says, true satisfaction might not live in achievements at all. It might live in awareness, understanding what you're feeling, why you're feeling it, and learning how to step off that endless chase. And here's the most important part. That deep human connection our hunter-gatherer ancestors had within their tribe. Today, we might have thousands of online friends and followers, but real, deep, face-to-face connection, the thing that probably matters most, often gets completely lost in our busy, digital, modern lives. So, at the very end of this entire journey, from the cognitive revolution all the way to AI and genetic engineering, Harari leaves us with one last, deeply personal question. We conquered the world, but did we ever actually understand ourselves? So let's bring this entire journey together. We started as a weak, helpless animal, hiding from lions in the dark. Then came a strange shift in the brain, the cognitive revolution, which gave humans the power to invent stories and cooperate with total strangers. That was the very first step that set us apart from every other animal, and even let us outlast the physically stronger Neanderthals. Then came the decision Harari calls humanity's biggest fraud: farming. We settled down. We started working the land. It laid the foundation for civilization, sure, but it also brought inequality, disease, and a life of hard labor with absolutely no way back. Then money, empires, and religion started stitching together those scattered communities. Total strangers, without ever meeting, started cooperating just by trusting the same shared story. That's where real globalization began. Then came the moment humans finally said, "We don't know, so let's find out." The scientific revolution shattered old myths, gave us a new way to understand the universe, and science itself became a new, modern religion. That new knowledge gave birth to capitalism, an endless hunger for growth that trapped us in a cycle of consumerism, where we always want more, but never actually feel satisfied. Then came machines, then factories. The Industrial Revolution completely restructured our lives, how we work, how our cities look, how we relate to our own environment. And today, we're standing at a point where we can literally control our own evolution. Genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, biotechnology. This could be the biggest opportunity in human history, or the biggest threat. But the most important question in this entire journey isn't about technology or progress at all. It's this: after all of it, are we actually happy? Harari's answer holds up a mirror. We conquered the entire world, but we still might not fully understand ourselves. And that's the biggest takeaway from Sapiens. Progress and happiness aren't the same thing. Power and peace aren't the same thing. We've completely transformed the world around us, but the real question is whether we've understood the world inside us just as well. The future ahead, AI, genetic engineering, all of it, will decide what Homo sapiens becomes next. But that future won't be decided by technology alone. It'll be decided by our choices, our ethics, and maybe, most importantly, by finally figuring out where real meaning and real happiness actually come from. So, that was the full journey through Sapiens, a brief history of humankind, from the cognitive revolution all the way to a future where we might be designing our own next species. If you enjoyed this one, do me a favor, drop a comment and tell me which part of this book hit you the hardest. Was it the agricultural revolution and that whole biggest fraud idea? Or was it that final question, are we actually happy? And by the way, when I told my friend Jordan about this whole summary, his first reaction was, okay, now I actually need to read this book myself. So if you're feeling that same pull right now, honestly, that's the biggest compliment this video could get. If you want more deep, thought-provoking book breakdowns like this every week, hit subscribe and tap that bell, because next time we're diving into an entirely different book, one that might shake up your thinking just as much as this one did. I'm Sushil, and you've been watching English Audiobook Summary. I'll see you in the next episode, with a new book and a new story. Until then, thanks for watching.